Let me just drop in and see what comes through.
Yeah, for sure.
It's all about connection to the earth, like you said. It's all about like the reason men are like, or anyone is like latching or addicted or whatever it is, like codependent or whatever, just because it's not a connection with the earth. And so he's seeking mother in woman, in a girlfriend or whatever, because he's still not feeling actually supported by the mother, which is that he doesn't realize that it's already all things and everywhere. So by just connecting with the earth and realizing that the feminine is not like a person only, it's like the energy of all life and all the earth, which manifests as woman or as plants and substances and food or whatever it is, but that there's even a deeper so it's like that's what it comes down is like I experience the seasons and the cycles and nature and and it all comes, I think it just comes from that place because so man has to grieve his mother wound, and like man has to grieve not feeling connected to women and not feeling supported and not feeling held, and he has to be okay with completely falling apart. He has to break down. He has to see what happens when there's nothing to hold on to.
Yeah.
He has to have a woman tell him no. Women have to tell men no.
Yeah.
To not enable codependency and not be their mothers.
Yeah.
And then man has to face that wound and then learn how to hold himself essentially in that heartbreak. And then when he does that, his armor can kind of dissolve it. And then he can learn to feel again. And when he learns how to cry and how to feel, and then he can then he becomes like sensitive and begins to feel nature again, and not just using different things to like dissociate and numb and like escape from actually feeling the wounds. So man has to learn how to grieve and hold himself in that grief like a mother, and realize that the mother is always holding, the feminine is always holding himself. And then through that process, you become sensitive the more you like release your identity as a man being separate from nature, or separate from woman, or separate from the earth, or separate from feminine. The more man releases that identity and breaks down into like being life, being the feminine actually, like man has to realize he is nature and he's not some separate individual. And then once that breaks down, he begins to feel nature moving through him. Like for me, I feel nature moving through me. And so man has to like know that he is one with nature, and surrender more deeply to the river of that, and to feeling, and to learn to be comfortable with feeling, and not just, and to be emotionally vulnerable and all that, for sure. That's some of what's coming up. Yeah,
there is this uncomfortability of like surrendering into like what is man as we shift every year, and that takes away from stagnicity of like thinking that I'm gonna be the same that I was last spring, and like holding on to that, and holding on to like what we were last summer, all these different seasons.
Yeah, there has to be a breakdown. So there has to be like, man has to go through death in order to go through rebirth. Man has to become comfortable with the winter and with being in the womb, and like incubated, like dissolve into like the baby again, and like and like not know where he ends and the mother begins. Man has to go into that like disintegration, like, and then internally, and know that these cycles are always happening inside him too. So like, just like women go through their moon cycles, like physically, men are going through that too, but just not in the same biological trigger. But I still go through like many cycles in a week or in a month or in a day.
How can we break
and you have to be comfortable with all these different dimensions of life, of nature, of the feminine and of darkness, and of all these different cycles, rather than just some fixed idea of man is this, man is this, and woman is this. It's like, no, man is actually all this, woman is all this. And then when you feel all of it, then you become a more integrated man and woman, and then you're like being what nature intended you to be, which is completely different, than like what we think it is.
So much so.
Yeah.
That's what I'm like, what do we hold on to goals and dreams? Like, what is this? Like, is it actually like downloads or like things our ancestors have told us the direction that we need to go? Or is it something that we're holding on to and we need to hang on to and we need to dissolve? Because honestly, like, nature only holds like what we need to do in life.
I don't think man
can.
I don't think man can hold like what nature really wants him to do, like its purpose and the dream that's being dreamed through him, until he can like release everything he thinks he knows about what he needs to be. So the more I release my idea of who I need to be and what I need to do and who I need to become, and just be okay with being like a blob of like a humble like piece of the earth, just like the more I can just like release everything and be like, all right, I'm not in control, like the earth is actually the one that's running the show, then we do get like downloads and like things to carry forth with us, but we have to learn to hold them like lightly, and that they're part of something, a bigger agenda that has to do with the earth and with the feminine, and it's moving through us rather than we're kind of creating it as a separate individual. And so that gives space to like continuously listen to like, oh, it's actually not what I think it is, and know that it's not what it, like always being open to having life just like wash away everything we think we know or we're supposed to do. But also part of it is like to trust what we're being actually shown and told in all these awakening experiences and all these like moments of like intimacy with like nature, ourselves, and like to trust those seeds and actually honor them and integrate them. Because that's a big part of it too, is like how often are we actually showing up to put into practice the things we've been shown, like the really deep things we've been shown, like the really deep things where it's like, oh wow, I have to like do this for the world and for the universe, and like how often do we actually live and remember that and integrate that? So I think integration has to be a big part of it. Instead of just always seeking the next thing, like you said, always seeking like integrating what we already have.
And it's honoring like space in that. Like, how much of us have space to integrate? Like, we're always like jumping into work and like the next thing, like you said, we're not taught integration too. Like, I was thinking about that, like festivals too. It's like, okay, we have this amazing experience for a weekend or a week or whatever, but it's like, how do we do this? Like, there's such a blockage once you're driving back home. It's like,
like imagine if we integrated everything we experienced at the festivals and like lived that way. I feel called to offer to teach and learn that more integration.
I think it like ties into like
and the cycles of like, there's like cycles of like expansion and growth, and there's cycles of spaciousness and rest. And because we don't slow down enough, man doesn't have a chance to connect with that feminine part of his being, which is like winter, fall, rather than just the masculine, like summer, spring. So
just go
man has to learn how to rest so that he can
talks. And I'm actually really curious in what you experience like monthly too in your cycles. Like, yeah, that's like not something common that, because I've asked this question before to males and like they're not really sure in their cycles that they experience monthly like we do as women. So
monthly.
even though it's not physical, like
I haven't tracked like if there's a specific way that it moves in month to month, but I notice many cycles like all the time. There's a way that like energy cycles in our being and in our body that's reflected in nature. So like even in the cycles are speeding up over time. So like in the past, to complete like an arc of like exploring the different realms of our psychology and our being and our energy, you might go like through a hero's journey throughout your life or something, like into the dark underworld and then coming back out. But nowadays we go through many in a day, I think, much more faster than ever before, because we're learning to integrate all those parts and just like and so it's like listening to anyway, so I'm gonna be listening now to how it flows in the month.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That'd be sweet.